I'm making this video to help victims of human trafficking discern whether a charity or trafficking center that they're requesting help from is in fact beneficial to their needs. And also, if you want to donate to a sex trafficking organization, if you feel like it's a cause worth donating to help victims, you are donating to a charity that's actually helping the victims and not just collecting money or funneling it into indoctrinating more people into the religion, or actually trafficking the victims at the same time that they're helping them or anything like that. The first thing is that the website should be about helping the victims. I mean, when you go on the front page of the website or you call the hotline, it should be about the first, line you can get through should be what can they do to help the victims and how are they housing them, or they're giving them free counseling. There should not be more links to donate. But then where's the help for the victim? Then they're not an actual charity, they're just collecting your money. And so I've tested a lot of charities out and called them. I've traveled over 40 states by myself as a traveling dancer, and I've dealt with all sorts of police harassment, several crazy things while I was traveling, and I just want to share my experience and knowledge with people. Okay, so secondly, this is very important. So the first thing is that the website should be all about helping the victim, and there should be ways to donate, but that should not be the focal point. And that's kind of a common sense thing. So the second thing is that the sex trafficking should not automatically be associated with being a drug addict or a prostitute. And in fact, prostitution shouldn't even be a word that they use, because prostitution is actually just a word made by patriarchy to slander women and keep them as sex objects and devalue them and basically make their whole identity about their sexuality instead of any other skills that they may have learned or studied as a human being. If you look at the history of prostitution, there's a lot of other names for it, like sex therapist, body work, temple nun, housewife. That's just kind of a joke, but I'm saying that prostitution is a derogatory, demeaning word, and it implies that a woman has nothing else to offer besides sex. While that might be true for people at certain points in their life where that's what they are doing and offering, you don't want to do anything that perpetuates that and makes that their whole identity for the rest of their life, because that's actually what causes human trafficking. And then the drug rehabilitation, that should not be automatically the same thing as a sex trafficking help. So if you're trying to get help with sex trafficking and they want to put you in a drug rehabilitation program, really that says that they have no understanding of sex trafficking and that they're equating you trying to get help with like potential person trying to kidnap you or exploit you as being the same thing as being a drug addict. That's a problem in our society that I think the baby boomers or a lot of people in the past have perpetuated, is that we blame a lot of our problems on drugs. It's easy when there's a societal problem where somebody kills themselves or like sex trafficking, it's easy to blame drug addictions. But really, what our society ended up doing was just scapegoating drugs as a very easy, sum it up, oh, they're on drugs, he's on drugs, she's on drugs. That's not really the underlying issue of the problem. There's underlying serious issues that need to be addressed in order to solve certain problems. And sex trafficking is not a drug problem, despite what the DEA or anyone who's benefiting off of the war on drugs might want people to think. It's a separate issue that overlaps, but it's not the same thing. Okay, so this is very, very important. Now, there's another topic that the organization should not be getting the police to follow around and harass the victim or the person who's trying to get help for human trafficking or counseling. If the police are involved, it should be to keep the sex traffickers away, or the alleged sex traffickers away from the victim, or investigate pimps and human traffickers, not further abuse the victims with jargon, prostitution, and drug laws, which were designed to favor human traffickers and disempower victims. So the last thing you want is to have the police involved and be scaring the victims from getting help. Again, that goes along with labeling them prostitution and drug addicts. You don't want any of that stuff. You want genuine help. The most important thing to focus on is the overall energy should be an atmosphere of empowering the victims and empowering women. The organization help victims of sex trafficking or women's advocacy groups. It should not be about recruiting women into Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, especially those three religions, because they're historically known to treat women like property. Treating people like property is the basis for human trafficking, which is why there were people with PhDs that I've talked to that emphasize that fundamental religion is actually related to sex trafficking. It is not the solution; it's actually the problem, because those books emphasize women being property. They title women, off of their vaginas, Virgin Mary. How would it sound if you said penis Jesus? That's very demeaning. Or, prostitute Mary Magdalene, versus how would it sound if you titled Peter Gigolo Peter? That's a very derogatory way to address women or title them. It's basically was intentionally done to discredit women and deplete them of their value and make them just basically about their sexuality. This is perpetuated again and again in Christian religions, and the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses. My parents were Catholic. Fundamental religion is not the answer to sex trafficking. It's actually part of the problem. Look for organizations that empower women instead of portraying them as sad, hopeless victims to feel sorry for and donate more money. My personal experience, though, so I'll give you some examples. I mentioned Safe CHR was the best organization I found to help me, and that was in Chicago, Indiana, and Denver. And I got free counseling. I got therapy. The doctor was not just a psychologist; she was a psychiatrist, so she could actually prescribe me drugs to help me sleep during the time I was experiencing extreme trauma. And then my first experience going to a social event with people, she gave me the microphone directly to explain my experience. She wasn't speaking for me. Organizations that don't give the victims a voice, that they try to speak for them. Let the victims speak. They might not be completely coherent, but at least you have these organizations letting them attempt to try to explain what happened or how things happened. And that's what my experience was. And it was empowering because I got to talk to politicians and groups in Chicago and Homeland Security and a lot of things. And I appreciated that. That was the best group I ever had. And then now I'm going to get to the negative groups, which I don't like talking about, but this is very important. So Phoenix, Arizona was a terrible place to get help in. It was basically I noticed after I got help, first off, it should have been a telltale sign when I talked about human trafficking. This group said it was, and it was a government organization. It was not a religiously funded organization. But the attitude was that they equated the human trafficking and me saying, hey, somebody was trying to kidnap me and I feel scared. I need somebody to talk to just for counseling because I'm having nervous breakdowns and PTSD and it's making me a little bit dysfunctional. That they equate that with, you're a drug addict. You say the word sex trafficking, you're like, well, get drug rehabilitation. You need to go into a 4-week program to prove that you're sober on drugs. The truth is, I've never had a drug problem. I've had serious problems with depression and stuff. But when you make these automatic assumptions, you're not actually listening to the victim. You're basically labeling them a drug addict, which is, you don't want any of those disempowering titles when somebody's trying to get help for something that's legitimate and real. Which, slavery is an ongoing problem in the United States, and it's not going to go away by ignoring it or pretending that it doesn't exist. 10 years ago, in 2012, I think was when I first became aware of the word sex trafficking. It was like I was gaslit everywhere. People didn't even know what it was. So, yeah, but what happened in Phoenix, Arizona, when I got help from an organization was that I noticed police were starting to follow me around, and to the point where they were almost harassing me when I was trying to get a hotel because I was working at a club in Phoenix. I had a female police officer, excuse me, can I help you? Trying to intervene for me going into the office to get my hotel card. Why would you bother me? First off, I didn't have any warrants. I wasn't causing any problems. I was just driving and checking into my hotel room. And I just ignored her and I just walked. She was like, can I help you? Very hostile. And I just ignored her and I walked past the car and into the office so that if they were to harass me, they would be in front of cameras and in front of the clerk at the front desk. And she backed off and drove away because obviously when police have spotlights on them, they don't get away with the kind of abuse and harassment that they get away with when nobody's watching. That was very scary, to not be doing anything and be harassed by the police. So, which actually made it hard when I moved to Colorado because I was scared to get help and get counseling. I still haven't. I've been getting counseling through more Reiki and spiritual groups, not actual therapists and counseling to talk about it. And it's very sad that a victim of sex trafficking can't get help for the issue that they're claiming that they have a problem with. It's turned into something that it's not because of this denial that it doesn't exist, or that this whole focus on prostitution versus sex trafficking. Really, prostitution shouldn't even be a law. There should be no laws about prostitution. There should be only laws about sex trafficking. But the patriarchy in our society still treats women like property. So you're going to have, when you have a patriarchal society, you're going to have them focused on women who are empowered through sex versus women who are kidnapped and enslaved, because apparently they're fine with women being property, but what they're not fine with is women who actually get compensated or empowered through their sexuality or their creativity. And then my other experience was in Sioux Falls. I had it was a Lutheran religious denominated organization, and to be fair, because I'm not putting the Lutheran church down, my grandmother was a Lutheran, and her pastor was involved in the Safe CHR group that I was in Chicago and Indiana, and he was a very nice man, and I believe he was genuine. And when I went to her funeral in church, there was both a male pastor and a female pastor equally participating in the altaral practices, which told me that they were more willing to integrate women and men working together in an open way, and women being priests instead of being lower than men as nuns or subservient to men. It's still Christianity, but it wasn't fundamental Christianity. I know you can't have a full-blown revolution and have people shoot and kill each other in order to change society instantly. It has to change gradually and suddenly, probably in a more gentle way. It's probably better and less traumatic for society to change that way than to just have a full-blown revolution of women taking power. But my experience was at the Lutheran organization, and again, I am not putting them down, but I'm putting what they were doing down. But I understand it was in the context of a very conservative Donald Trump supporting area. They probably had no other choice to portray these victims in the way that they were portraying them, but they were not giving the victims a voice. First off, they were just housing as many victims as possible, and they were trying to get more and more funding to disempower women and house them. And it wasn't empowering women, it was just showing the victims as like these just really sad cases that there was no solution other than to give them money so that they could house them to keep them safe from the pimps, instead of holding the police that were helping the sex traffickers accountable, going after the sex traffickers. And I think that this, in South Dakota, I mentioned in my other videos that I lived on the Indian reservation and I'm a quarter Native American. I believe those laws that were meant to traffic Native Americans end up happening to anyone now, because they're just laws were specifically aimed at the Native American population. South Dakota has the highest amount of land dedicated to Native Americans for various tribes. And when I went to jail temporarily there over the pepper spray case, 90% of the women or more were Native American. It just opened my eyes. The population of Native Americans is only at most 50%, but why? And then especially in Sioux Falls, that was not a Native reservation. It was 80% white, I think, in Sioux Falls, or maybe 60% white. I don't know, but 90% or more of the women were Native American women, and they were very kind, actually. You can tell that the wrong people are in jail when you actually like being around them and you make friends, and just they're very kind. And they would braid each other's hair. They would make dream catchers out of tampon strings and like bottle caps. And I left with one when I left it on the reservation as just to bless the place I was at. I wish I would have kept that dream catcher that was made for me. Yeah, all I'm saying is that the context of this Lutheran organization was in an area where they were in denial about sex trafficking, so giving it a voice and even raising awareness on the radar of people had to be done in a way that was relevant to these very extreme religious Christian Donald Trump supporters. And I don't want to put Donald Trump supporters down, because I lived in an area and I respect that they said what they believed in and they were open about it. And the human trafficking can be disguised as helping immigrants out, and addressing illegal immigration or any kind of immigration can easily, the argument to help immigrants out in other countries can easily be used to import slaves from other countries under the guise that you're helping people, when you're really just bringing people in for slavery. And that's how the original black slaves were brought into the United States, was under this argument that they were helping black people have better lives. So all this stuff you have to be aware of. But yeah, and then another thing, I don't even want to get into Alabama and Arkansas. God, there's like almost no hope for the people who have these religious mind states. Even talking to a friend, I would never drive through those states. I feel too scared to drive through those states. I think ending slavery is still on the ballot. At least they finally acknowledge it, though. That's what I'm trying to say. At least they're acknowledging that it exists. That's the start, to acknowledge that this slavery in the United States exists. That was on the ballot on November 8th recently. I mean, it made people laugh, but really the reality is slavery exists everywhere in the United States still, and to this day. And making an amendment to get rid of it only made people disguise it better. So another experience, Alabama and Arkansas, when I called a friend for help, they had no idea what I was talking about. The organization they referred me to said I would have to do an 8-week drug rehabilitation program. That's a red flag to never even go into those states if they don't even, nobody even knows what sex trafficking or human trafficking is, and they're in denial about it, and the Christian religion is the answer to everything. Being equated to a drug addict when you have an actual problem that's a real problem from something else is just a very very cruel label to slap on anyone who's having any other issue in our society that's needs some more attention and needs some more evaluation and a deeper understanding. I had a very good help with Minnesota. Minnesota was the advocacy groups were very conscious, and they were very female empowering, and they were very cautious about religion, which was good. Instead of the organization being run by religion or trying to convert me to a religion, they were helpful. They gave me money one time to make phone calls while I was in jail, and there was one in St. Cloud. I forgot what it was. God, I should look that up. I don't know what that organization was, but I know it was a little house, and it was very helpful, and the women were very understanding, and they were of all racial backgrounds: Black, white, Muslim, Hispanic. Yeah. I feel like Native Americans have it the worst, though. They don't have any representation in a lot of these organizations.